Rosey Cassidy, welcome to Property Leaders. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
This is an interesting first show because this is actually, I didn't tell you this, this is the first time I've ever done something live in person.
Okay.
Usually it's been over Zoom every time.
Okay, yeah.
So this is the first time live, so I appreciate it.
Okay, brilliant.
You probably don't know what you're in for, but I'll try and make it good. So, why property? Why are you in property? What drives you to invest in property?
I think initially getting into property, I always joke about this, wasn't really a choice.
Yeah.
Family business, all of that. I did consider going to uni to do things like medicine and everything, and I just realised, actually, by the time I finished sixth form, I didn't like structured learning in that way anymore. I just wanted to be out pretty much earning money. And then property was the logical thing, so that's the only thing I had skills in, really, after leaving sixth form. But then what's kept me in it, I think, is the variety it offers. So for me, I get bored so quickly. Like, it's an ongoing joke. I'm like recently moved house. My parents are like, you're going to be moving again soon, because I get bored of stuff. So with property, you know, every day I can be doing something different. You know, if you've got a couple of sites on at different stages in the pipeline, one might be you're on site, one might be you're sorting finance, one might be with a landowner, and one might be in planning. That's such a variety of tasks that I have to do that it keeps me interested.
Okay, perfect. That's how you like to work. So you like to have lots of different, you like to vary your day, basically.
Yeah.
Do you think that's, I'm just going to jump in, does that help you achieve everything you want to achieve? Or is it hard? Do you find it hard? Do you wish you could focus more on just certain tasks? Yeah,
in some ways it probably, particularly in development where, you know, nothing happens overnight, I can focus, you know, like a laser for a day on something and, you know, perfect. But what I can't stand, I hate the thought of, is the same day in and out, you know, doing the same thing, which sometimes is the case in property. You know, it takes so long to get anything moving. So sometimes I'll start with a load of momentum and I have to really like force it towards the end, which luckily is broken up with other tasks by other things. But if that was, you know, if I was working in a development company for someone else and my only role was finance, I can do it, because I can't just do one thing over and over again.
Do you find, so for people listening, so to focus as much as you can on a particular goal, is there any kind of tricks that you use to keep your mind focused at the time? So say you know it's really important that you need to try and find a site within a certain area. Yeah. Is there a way that do you focus your time focus your attention for a certain period of time? Do you listen to music?
Do you have to sit on your own? I sit in the office with people, but I have to have my headphones in, listening to something. I normally listen to like a podcast or some random. I'm not even actually listening to it. It's just blocking out anything else. Yeah. And normally I'll do like an hour stint where I won't talk to anyone, and then like break out of it, play with Spud in the office, and then go get a drink, come back, another hour stint. And the biggest thing for me as well is if I've got a task like that, whatever it might be, when I come to work that day, I have to leave knowing I've done something to progress that task, if that makes sense. So even if it's making several phone calls, chasing up certain things, as long as I've done whatever I needed to do that day to move the task forward, then I feel like I've done it, and I normally try and do it first thing. You feel like you've achieved something? Yeah. Let's go back to the very start. Okay. So property. Yeah. So what are your first memories of property in general? So my dad built our house, well, I say our house, my parents' house, and we moved into it when I think I was maybe 3. Yeah. We moved in, and we actually lived in caravans, like on the land. While it was being built. Nice. So I remember like spending a lot of time there, like
picking up bricks.
Just like playing with my brothers in the brick pile, stuff like that. I've also got this one. Really feel, I don't think I should say it. My dad used to drive us around in the back of his pickup truck. He had a flatbed pickup truck, and all my brothers and me and cousins would all sit in the back of it, like with all the bricks and stuff, and he'd drive us around. It's so illegal, obviously. I remember going to site one day, it was one in Coventry, with my brother above me, and him putting us in the digger bucket and moving the digger bucket around, and that, got to be maybe like, I don't know, 4 or 5 when... Yeah, that was the case.
Some really early memories.
Really early ones on building sites, either the family home or one of Dad's.
So were you very aware from a young age, to give the listeners some content, obviously your dad, your family are developers? Yeah, or builders, would you say?
I knew Dad. I always thought Dad was a builder.
Yeah.
It was like
someone that puts stuff together and people live in it.
Yeah. Like I thought it was a builder. He was, when I was younger, a developer. He still spent a lot of time on site when I was younger, but he was more of a, I think I would have called him a builder. Like I'd probably refer to like a bricklayer nowadays, was what I thought my dad was when I was little. But then as I got older, I realised he sort of builds lots of houses.
Was he always talking to you about stuff that he was doing and quite open with sharing, okay, I'm building this site over here and I'm building from a young age? How did he kind of get you into, or did you just want to be with your dad? So you were kind of close to that and were drawn to that?
Yeah, I always wanted
to spend time with your dad.
Yeah, I wanted to spend time with Dad and...
Like, I better put a hard hat on and start doing some work.
And it was always the conversation, at home between my parents or whatever. And I used to love going to Dad's office whenever I was allowed. It was generally a lot of the conversation. Then as my eldest brother's 10 years older than me, he became a bricklayer.
Yeah.
So then, when he's like 17, 18, becoming a brickie, I'm 7, 8, and then all the conversations about him learning. Yeah. And then his time on site. Then my brother below him also became a bricklayer. So then, if it wasn't my dad talking about his business, it was construction in
a different area.
In another format with one of the family members.
Did you know at a very young age that you were going to end up in property in some form? Because you talked about obviously medicine and what you studied and stuff. So
no, I don't. I think I only realised I was going to go into property. So I did a gap year. After I finished.
Where did you go on a gap year?
Nowhere. I started working.
I
started working.
That's that's the most productive gap year I've ever heard of.
Exactly. So then I'm still technically on that gap year. Yeah. I didn't know going into that gap year what I was going to do. I felt a lot of pressure to go to university, like all my friends were going to, and like I say, medicine was an option. I always liked a lot of sciencey things, so there was a lot of sort of science degrees I was looking at, but I didn't know what on earth that career was going to look like after. And then, I just started working and then realised I like working. And then, like I say, property just it was the only thing I knew at that time in enough detail to actually start a career in it. So then I went into land agency and then,
Why did you go into land agency?
Because I didn't want to just work for my dad. It was like a really big thing.
Why did you not want to work for your dad?
One thing was my dad's one of those like traditional people who...
I'll just say as well, I've met your dad and he's lovely.
Yeah, don't be wrong. And we never, I don't work for him now, and it was not because we fell out. Yeah. It was just, he's one of these people that are so busy doing what he does, he doesn't have time to stop and train you actively. Obviously, I absorbed everything that was happening, but he wouldn't stop and actively be like, right, this is your job role. So I sort of just felt like a spare part. And then added on to the fact that I was the director's daughter, it just felt like I was there for the ride. Whereas going off on my own, I was establishing my own thing, learning. So there's certain things now that I would probably be better at than my dad, because I've gone and learned about them on my own. And just I think it was just maybe a pride thing, wanting to just do it myself before just working for dad.
Absolutely. So when you did, where did you go to work as a land agent? Was it Fine and Country? Yeah. Okay. Are you quite a strategic person, would you say? Are you a planner? Do you think, okay, I'm going to go and work as a land agent? Did you have a plan? I know people say 5-year plan, but did you have an idea of maybe where you wanted to get to, or even subconsciously? I think subconsciously at first, I always knew I probably wanted to be a developer. Once I knew I wanted to get into property, I was like, well, if I'm going to do it ultimately I'm going to do it for myself. I probably didn't actually really start believing that was a possibility maybe until 2 years later, when then I was like, actually no, this is really what I want to do. And then I don't know, 2 years after I started Newman Rose, I'm trying to think how long I've been working now. 4 or 5 years, I think. It's in time flies when you're having fun.
No, maybe longer. It's
interesting that you said I only really started to believe it 2 years after you worked at Fine and Country. And, I imagine people kind of looking from the outside in, very confident, you've got your own co-founder of a property company. Yeah, it's interesting that even you, literally with your family basically, are a property family in that way, isn't it? So that doesn't necessarily guarantee success, but it means that you maybe one would think you'd have more confidence to be like, right, I know I can do this, they do.
Yeah, it was just
so it's interesting. that he took you a couple of years to get there?
Well, I think it was like when my dad just turned 50,
Yeah.
51, something around that time. I'm thinking, he's been in it for years. Like, even then, I still felt overwhelmed at, like, I know quite a bit, but I don't even know about half of it still. Yeah. So it was only as I started to learn more, and actually part of it was, I would be in meetings with other developers who are 40 or something, and I realised actually quite often I had more knowledge than them in at least a lot of areas. So I was like, actually, no, maybe I do know more than because I never realised how much I knew was the big, because it was just second nature, absorbed through existing with my family. And I still do it now, like, and when I was building the course, for example, it was really difficult because I didn't know what's baseline knowledge for like the general public and what is something I've learned, because I never learned it in like a structured way.
You absorbed it like a sponge,
Yeah, so it was like, I actually didn't, it took me a while to actually realise just how much I knew. Just
from having conversations with other developers.
Yeah, and I was like, you don't know that. That's weird. Like, and then I was like, actually, no, maybe I have got this. And then that's when the confidence grew, and then I started learning about things I didn't know about, and
building confidence is a really important thing for people to be able to take a step to start their own business. Whether it's in property or any type of business. What would be your advice to someone who wants to kind of get started in property, but they don't have the confidence? If you were to say to someone, right, this is the first thing you need to do. You want to get involved in property, you're not sure what, but you look at a building and you get excited by looking at that building and think, what would be your advice to someone?
I think the biggest thing, it sounds quite like cliche, obviously having like an education company, but educate yourself. And that doesn't necessarily mean, like do a course in property development. It could just be, what a lot of people don't realise is how many careers there are in property. So you might look at a building and think, that really excites me, but what is it about that? Is it the architecture, in which case maybe you want to go down that route? Is it, the finance, how the numbers work? So it's not just you necessarily want to be a property developer, because sometimes actually people
don't want to be.
They might think they do. Realise what's involved and go, actually, no, I don't want to do that. So, educating yourself in the first instance can just mean understanding what it is you want to do. Get a lot of clarity in that, because I think for me, confidence can come from like having a lot of clarity around what it is. Because even if it means you then know what you don't know, at least you can then start chipping away at that, and that builds your confidence. Whereas for some people getting into property, it's where, there's so much, like where do you even begin to start? And that's really overwhelming. So I think even just start to narrow it down, so then you can then realise what you don't know and then work back from that, I think is probably the best first step anyone can take.
I think an interesting way, you hear a lot of stuff from, successful entrepreneurs and stuff, that you should try, when you're young especially, just try different things. So if you think you might like the finance, go and learn some stuff about finance and property. And if you think you want to be an architect, go and learn. And then in the end, you kind of find what you're passionate about and what you really want to get involved in. Then actually kind of try and focus in on and go for that. So land agent, Fine and Country. What were kind of the key things that you took away from working for an organisation like Fine and Country? Big company?
They're a big company. They're sort of like a franchise-based company. To be fair, the way we worked there, we were sort of more like a self-employed kind of model, and I always sort of kept that model in my land agency times. So one thing I've realised is I'm probably unemployable. I don't like working. And it probably comes back to that. I like variety. I don't like having a sort of like a set job. If that makes sense. But I think the biggest thing was, I guess, in some ways realising just how hard it is. Like, to get those leads, to get the landowners involved, to get the sale agreed. Like, that was I sort of maybe naively was like, well, you'll approach someone and then they'll say yes. I think, why wouldn't they? It was that sort of like, oh, no, that isn't how it works. Like, realising you've really got to like keep pushing at people, even more so as a land agent, because you're basically a middleman, versus like as a developer it's actually a little bit easier.
Do you think that?
I think so, because people will take it more seriously, I think, for developer approaches, whereas a land agent, they're like, oh, well, why? There's always a lot of like negative perception around agents in the UK, I think, and people they're like, oh, I don't like estate agents, sort of thing. So I think that was my biggest learning curve, was just how hard the industry can be.
Are you quite an optimistic person? Because you said, oh, like, I just contact the landowner.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they want the deal? It's a great deal. We're giving them 200 grand more than what their farmer's worth or whatever.
I think I don't know if optimistic's the word, but I'm a really like rational person.
Yeah.
And I sometimes assume that everyone
Gets
thinks
it.
like as rationally as I do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you? Like, of course you would do that. And whereas some people, most people are massively emotionally led by decisions. And I'm just there like, that doesn't make sense to me. So it's not necessarily like an optimism. It's just I sometimes forget not everyone thinks in the way I would think about something.
I think that's a learning skill for us all, though, isn't it?
That
I think we all want to like to think that everyone likes to think like what we do.
Yeah.
Because then it makes us feel good, like we're right or whatever, or not
exactly.
whatever we're right. But so it's, I think, understanding the personalities that you're dealing with. And like you said, most people are
there's the driving factors behind
emotion
other people.
Is why people buy, isn't it?
So
okay, cool. So Fine and Country, obviously learnt a lot there.
Yeah.
Then where did your kind of journey go after that?
So then I went and did land agency in Birmingham under the it was the Finance for Business brand, which has now become Armco. More recently, I still work very closely with them now, actually. And I work with a guy called Phil there who runs Atlas Land and New Homes now, and like he was like first day at Fine and Country, and then even now I see him and talk to him several times a week, sort of thing. And so I went with him, and then eventually I just sort of realised, one, I didn't like working in Birmingham. I didn't like the super like corporate, the commute, just all of it wasn't for me. And then I just sort of realised that I was probably done with being land agent side. I wanted to go back to developer side. So then I went back with my dad, basically, until I left back end of 2020. It's basically a year ago, and set up on my own.
Going back, you smiled when you talked about that Phil guy. Yeah. So obviously he was I imagine he was a good help to you. So if we go sort of flip into mentors, was he a bit of a mentor for you? Or a sounding board, maybe?
He was a sounding board. So he was new. So he's 20 years older than me. I mean, I'm always joking. He's like my 44-year-old best friend. Yeah. Sorry, Phil, if you listen. Just outed your age.
You just outed his age. Oh my god.
But like he came from like a logistics background, and I think he started at Fine and Country like 6 months before me.
Okay. Yeah.
So we were very much in like a similar position in terms of like experience and everything. So we were almost like. Kind
of the newbies starting together.
So we were like a soundboard off of each other pretty much, and then. Obviously now he's a land agent. I'm actually looking at several sites with him, sort of thing. So we still work together in another capacity, if that makes sense. But we definitely those first years at Fine and Country and in Birmingham, we were like a pair. It was like where Phil was, I was, sort of thing. Yeah.
Who would you? Do you feel like you've got any mentors?
Yeah, my dad's obviously without a fact, my biggest one. To be fair, a lot of people in the Armco business. To this day, I admire a lot for Russell Martin, who runs that. A lot of respect for him. I think he runs a massive organisation. I can't even imagine. What that's like. But yeah, definitely my dad is the
like pillar.
Yeah, he's like the oracle of it for me, in every sense. Yeah.
What is it about your dad that makes it? If we take the fact that he's your dad apart, right? Let's just put that to one side. And as a mentor, what does he give you? What do you get from him as a mentor?
Well, one, like if you know my dad's backstory, he didn't come from much at all, and he's built a massive business today, but at the same time couldn't be more of a humble person, which I love. Like everyone always says that about my dad, like he's just so down to earth and normal. So the fact he's done that, I always think, well, I had such a better start, so like I have to surely do more. If he's been able to achieve what he did from where he came from, like for me that's a massive inspiration because I think to show like the appreciation for the start he gave me, that's sort of the motivation for me. But the biggest thing is like he I don't know if patience is the right word, but if I was to call my dad now, like it's an ongoing joke in the office, like set an hour aside to talk to my dad, because it doesn't matter what he's doing in his day, he could be on site, he could basically be anywhere, and I could be, oh dad, just a quick one, what do you think of this roof truss design or whatever, or literally anything, and he will spend an hour explaining it to me. There is no quick answer. So, you know, if I've ever had an issue, I don't just get fobbed off and a quick, it's that, or whatever, or speak to this person. I will get all the detail in the answer I could put, and 10 times more than I could possibly want, which obviously when it comes to like learning from someone,
huge.
It's huge that someone, you know, I see him as like, like a Steve Jobs type person of the property space. There is there is nothing you can, as Alex in my dad's office that we joke about, there is nothing that you can't ask that man about construction. If you've got like a pub quiz about construction, you want him on your team, like he knows everything. Yeah. So like, you know, someone like that with that level of knowledge that's willing to literally sit and explain it, and it wouldn't just be to me, he would do it to literally anyone probably.
I did it first time.
Yeah, exactly. Like he'll sit and talk to anyone. It's not just me. Yeah. You know, having that like is invaluable in ways that like I couldn't even begin to quantify.
Do you think? So you talked about kind of like you feel like you should do better than your dad. You know, you're better than your family because you've been given a different starting point. There. Do you think that's a fear that drives you to like gives you the drive and the motivation to really push on?
Yeah, I think.
Do you think it's fear or inspiration?
Probably a bit of both. You could spin it both ways, but I don't see necessarily it being fear as it being a bad thing, if that makes sense. Like some people think that's a bad driving factor. I don't. I always joke that in my family, so my dad comes from an Irish family, and there's Catholic guilt, if anyone's ever heard of it. It's like you see it a lot in family. My dad can't stop working. Like even on the weekend, he'll be cleaning or he'll be like mowing the lawn.
Around the house.
He's got to do something. He doesn't switch off, and it's a like apparently a really common thing in like families that come from like an Irish background. So I definitely at times see myself being a bit like that. Like I can't just like I'm very rarely sit and just watch TV at home or something. I'm always doing something. But I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. Like some people say, oh, that's you know, you should be able to just switch off, whatever. But right now in my life, I like that. And yeah, it probably is a fear that I won't do well enough, but I like that it either way it's driving me to where I am now and where I'm going, which hopefully is going to be really big things. But one interesting, you know, people often like, oh, you've achieved so much. I always think I've achieved nothing to what I should have. I'm still now disappointed at where I'm at. I think I could have done more by now.
I have a very similar feeling to you. I think that's probably what that sort of feeling of like not enough. I think you'll find that a lot of people who want to be successful or are successful feel like that because that's what drives them on. If you still feel satisfied, you get complacent, and then you know, you maybe don't achieve everything that you want to achieve. Yeah, exactly.
My business partner Tyler, he's like 10 times worse than me for it. Like nothing is ever good enough for Tyler. Like, but I quite like that because, like I say, between us, it keeps
drives everything forward.
It drives everything going forward. But I think it's a very common trait in any industry. Successful people is they don't feel enough, and that's probably some deep issue that they've all got. But like I say, I don't see it as like a negative thing, like a lot of people do.
What do you do to switch off? And the answer can't be sleep.
I don't sleep. I'm not a good sleeper.
Don't even sleep either.
I read a lot.
What do you read? Is it
sort of anything?
So you'll read fiction, non-fiction?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. Listen to podcasts.
Sounds silly, but I enjoy what I do. Like, I don't feel the need to like have switch off time, if that makes sense. But exercise definitely. I like swimming a lot and going to the gym, spend time with Spud, friends. But like I say, I don't get to the weekend, I'm like, oh, thank God we're at the weekend, if that makes sense. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. And if I've got a boring weekend, I'm like, I wish I was in the office.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a bit about, obviously, the new company, Newman Rose. Yeah, which you've co-founded with your business partner, Tyler.
Yeah.
So talk to us about what's the vision of the company. Just give us kind of some information about that.
So at the minute, we're sort of doing smaller luxury residential schemes, and that will be the focus over the next few years. And the big thing, we sort of briefly spoke about this before we started recording, was there's not really like a brand in the development space. Like, there are some like household names like Taylor Wimpey, Barrett's, whoever, not to slag them or anything, but you don't think, so inspiring, like you say. Like,
yeah,
it's just is what it is. And a lot of people, they could be spending £2,000-3,000 on a house, and it's like the worst experience of their life.
Yeah.
And we just think that's wrong, I guess. Like, I think there's a big discrepancy between the way the end user experiences the product and the way the developer delivers it. It's even like I would say, like, down to terminology, I'd call it units. Yeah. It's not like that's someone's home. Like, you're buying that as a home, and I'm referring to it as a number. Yeah. Because unfortunately, you know, the way banks work and everything, it does drive the industry to be like that. But what we're trying to do is put a bit of that connect back into it. So from the start, think about, you know, how will people live in that house? Yeah. At the forefront of designing it, everything, you know, remembering that someone will ultimately live in what we build, and you know, try and translate that into the product. And that doesn't necessarily just mean it's going to be super, super expensive. You know, the first site, the houses are, you know, around 400,000, but, you know, we want them to be the best product in that price bracket, basically. And that's like the big vision, is just to create almost like the aspirational brand in property. Like, you know, we want to live in a Newman Rose home because it's associated with, you know, just being a really nice place to live, basically, because, you know, it's where you have your kids, raise your family, your first home. You know, it's the most important place is your home. And unfortunately, I think that fundamental is lost in most developers. And then long term, we do want to get into like the owner operator space. So, you know, essentially like a fund with retained stock, but again with that same thought process behind it. So even if someone's just renting there, it's still their home, even if it's just for 12 months. And the way the building operates should reflect that, in our opinion.
Really interesting. Let's start with the first part, the first sort of plan. So you talk about the delivery basically isn't very good. Do you think that's because estate agents get involved? Not like, actually, if we take that would probably be for a smaller builder. Let's take actually the big boys, you know, the big companies first. They do all their stuff in house. It's all controlled by them. What's wrong with the delivery? What would you do differently? I
think whenever you get a business that big, it does become a beast of its own. You know, it naturally will become less personable, because I don't know how many people tell you when people are working for them, thousands. You know, it isn't, and unless you really drive in like your corporate ethos into every employee, that this is our ethos, i.e., you know, we think a house is a home. That's so cliche, but you know what I mean. Like it won't translate. And I just think, you know, they are driven by numbers. They're a PLC. A lot of the big house builders, you know, they've got boards to satisfy. They've got really strict like lending criteria. I think, you know, someone said recently, like, the contingency on some of the big house builder houses is like £110 per house. Okay. Contingency, like, for anything to go wrong, which is nothing. Like, you replace a door and that's that gone, you know, sort of thing. So, I just think it's not to say that they're doing anything wrong. It's just, unfortunately, the way funding is, the way banks are, it leads you to just focus on the numbers, particularly when you get that big of a company with the overheads they will have every month. Like, you know, my brother does a lot of the brickwork locally for a lot of the big house builders, and they will, depending on how the sales rate is going at the front end, they will pause construction on phases down the line. They'll pause it for even just 3 weeks so that they have the perfect sales rate at the front end, because it's all about the numbers. And you need to better produce that, Which, don't be wrong, is, you know, really respectable, and in fact, you know, managing your cash flows and everything so perfectly. But when you think that that's how they run, it's not surprising then that
people get upset when they're 3 months late and it's their home and they want
you know, or, you know, unfortunately the process, they are just a number in the cog, basically.
There's an interesting, because I heard an interesting story about a lot of finance directors get made into CEOs, and that the finance directors are not usually the visionaries; they're the numbers people. So there was a company that I heard of. The finance director got made the CEO, and the CEO said to him, "Remember, there is a person behind every number on that Excel tab." Same sort of thing, innit?
No, it's the exact same thing.
It's very easy
to forget
that there's a human being behind that £400,000 house that you've actually, or a family, that are so excited to move in.
And when what ultimately drives that business forward and keeps that business going is focusing on the numbers first and foremost, you know, you can understand why it happens. So I don't think it's necessarily like it's not a dig at anyone else in the market.
No, it's not a right and wrong. It's
just an observation. Yeah. And I would like, and I think, the way we approach the sites we take on, I have a really high build budget, not because I'm necessarily going to spend it all, but because I like the options.
Yeah.
To ensure that we build the right product, rather than being squeezed from the get-go and then having to compromise on something. So right from the start of looking at a site, that is
very,
is like included in our thought process, is all of that. Whereas, I think the big sites that, the big house builders build and the quantity they need to deliver, if they added that into their criteria, they'd probably never find a site.
Yeah.
It's the reality of it, unfortunately.
Give me an example. Newman Rose, right? What would you do? So in the sales process, you agree a sale with someone, and they're moving in 6 months' time. Give me an example or some examples of what you would do differently in that sales process to get them to the point of moving. Just an example of what you may do differently
before even the sales process. It's the house itself.
Yeah.
So little things like in one of the sites we've got coming up north, we're going to get sleep consultants in to make sure the rooms are designed for optimal sleep.
Yeah.
Because we
Love
think particularly Tyler, like I said, I don't sleep very well, so maybe I need it. Your environment shapes who you are. It shapes
you're going to buy them
business.
Whoop watches and stuff.
Yeah, all that all that sort of thing. So it before they even get to the point of buying the house, so much has gone in to it before even meeting the person, just for any person. And then I think a big thing is just the customer service, so having dedicated update points, a clear point of contact that is always available. And then we haven't fully bottomed out the process, but it might even be things like just assisting with the moving process. Little things like that,
detail.
The detail, and we might even start going out to market to understand what are people's pain points in the buying process. I think we want to make it more personable. First of all, we can do that easily with points of contact with us, with a main point of contact, and as long as they understand our ethos and all of that, fantastic. But there are other points within that journey which are really stressful, and we need to now understand what are they and what can we do to alleviate them. Now we can't obviously be the removals person for every company, but certain things we want to find the pain point and just think, can we alleviate it at all? Which in the grand scheme of things will probably be quite a minimal cost, but if it just means that someone's it's a massive life decision, is slightly less stressful. You're never going to take all the stress out of it.
Well, they say, don't they, it's the most stressful thing.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't
be. But it is.
But it is. Yeah. And it's what can we do, even from the legal side, from our team, to, what's happening in their chain, and it could even be like, do we recommend a certain estate agent that we know will fit into our ethos and process a lot better? Because if they've got an estate agent that's selling their house in the chain that's awful, that could be their point of stress, but we can't control that. And it's trying to control more factors in that process.
Or collaborating with the right
people that all have that same vision to just make it a nice experience for everyone. And that's basically what we want to do. But we believe it in the first instance just comes from the actual quality of the product as well.
I love what you said. So it's really interesting what you said about the sleep. So it's just going into more depth into basically how these properties are designed. And I think if you look at kind of, for example, like clothing now, it's all about kind of smart, you've got the smart clothing basically. It's becoming a lot more trendy. Everyone's wearing an Apple Watch and it's got their heart rate. And if your heart rate starts going up, your watch starts telling you. So I like how I can see how that will move. It should be in property, shouldn't it? A home should be designed to be optimal for how you sleep.
For your sleep, your health, your mental health, everything. It's where you're going to spend so much of your time.
You spend a lot of your time there, don't you?
And if there's anything we can do to help that, even with the lighting design and things like that. Like, it sounds really silly, but the amount of people that go into a changing room, they say the lighting's awful, it makes you feel really ugly. I've been into houses where you look in the mirror and you're like, oh my god, that's like that's awful. Like, so little things like the dressing room, and you're en suite and stuff, at least have really nice lighting so that you wake up and think, oh, I look good today. Like, boost your confidence. So when you go into work, you're feeling good, not thinking, oh God, I looked absolutely awful this morning.
Definitely.
It sounds so silly and little, but and that's just things from our own experience that we would like, and that's what I mean, where it's just, how would we like to use that house, and if we were living in it. And I think when you put that more personal touch of, not to the point of it being completely how we like it, if that makes sense.
It needs to,
it needs to still meet general market, but just, I think
everyone likes to sleep, everyone wants to look good.
Exactly, and it's just putting that human thought into it.
Yeah, human touch, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely, completely agree. Do you think you can do that for a house? Let's say you're building 2-bedroom linked terrace houses. Super modern, really cool, but they're like 250 grand. Yeah. Can you still put that thought and personal, like, not to personal touch, but just that much thought into the design from a small home to, or has it got to be luxury?
I think naturally you're going to be slightly more limited.
Yeah.
I couldn't put, for example, like in the big houses, there probably will be full aircon systems to keep the temperature correct.
Yeah.
Your build costs won't, in certain areas just will not allow it. You wouldn't be able to get a deal done at a land value that works with the build costs that would be needed.
But couldn't you charge more? You
could charge some premium, but you're always going to be,
there's a ceiling.
If you're a 2-bed semi, great, you've got aircon, but if at the same price I could buy a 4-bed detached, I'm going to buy the 4-bed detached and put a fan in, in the nicest way possible. So there's always like the sense check. But that doesn't mean you can't take a lot of the same principles and some of the sort of low-hanging fruit. It's just making sure the room sizes are... The amount of times you go into
window sizes,
the light, I think there's enough natural light into the room. So there is still, and that's what I sort of said, it doesn't have to be the luxury, it's just in whatever price bracket we're presenting the best product in that price bracket. And that does mean that there are certain sites we can't make work on the pricing because we do have higher build costs and things like that, and it just means it takes longer maybe to find a site, and you'll hear me say to students, you're better off saying no to 10 and waiting for the 11th that works in every way it should than rushing in just to get a site that then doesn't really work and doesn't really meet the brand, and you think, why would I do this?
Absolutely.
So
that's really interesting. It's very inspiring. So from the build to rent stuff or the owner operator, so talk to me about why you like that, what you can do differently, how you guys are going to get into that.
We see, obviously talk about all, doing this to make nice houses and everything, but obviously there's money involved in property.
Of course,
And we see the biggest way to grow long-term wealth is in the retained stock. You get the capital appreciation over time, whereas when you sell it, you don't get it anymore, you get the cash flow, and then there are, if you structure it right, certain tax benefits to having retained stock. So overall we see it as the best sort of wealth generation strategy. So that's one of the massive driving factors. But we're probably in sort of 2022 going to look to get those first sites, take them through planning, and then hopefully sort of 2023 actually
build one out or
start breaking ground on them. Obviously I having worked at Cassidy for so long, that's what my dad does. I've got a lot of knowledge in that sector anyway, and a lot of contacts that I can lean on. So it's sort of actually going to be going back to what I know in a sense. It's not in the same way moving into something completely new for me.
Will you, because I know your dad, the Cassidy group does quite a bit of student stuff. Are you looking at students? Have you got an idea of, because there's lots of different things you can do as an owner operator, from student to like co-living to build to more of a newer build to rent model. Have you got an idea of what route you guys want to go down?
We like the the newer sort of build to rent model, more like the American model.
Single multifamily and stuff.
Multifamily sort of model. I think student, it would have to be the right site in super prime locations. Only because obviously we're an online educator. When you look into the stats of the way it's going, not saying I think universities will become redundant, but I think we will see a shift in the way universities use, and I think if we were to focus solely on student, particularly if we were to get into any secondary or tertiary locations, I think we'd expose the portfolio to risk, to be honest. So we would do student in
the right place,
in the right location, that even if, there will always be a need for university for your traditional degrees like medicine, law, all of that. So there will always be demand for student accommodation, and providing we're in the right location, providing some of the best quality, it'll be fine. But I wouldn't I wouldn't entertain. I'd be more likely to entertain a lower location in PRS because I see the growth in the market moving into it, whereas the wrong location in student, I think you could be left exposed.
What do you like about build to rent? And what do you like about the American model? And who's doing it? And second part to that question, who's doing it well over here at the moment?
I like the model because I think the UK, we obsess over home ownership far too much.
Yeah.
We're probably one of the main countries in the world that really obsess over it. And don't get me wrong, there is benefits to owning at home, but there's also a lot of benefits to not. You know, not having the hassle of it and just renting and having the flexibility to up and leave and all of that. And I think if we shifted more of a focus into the rental market, purpose-built, quality rental accommodation...
May change that culture.
It changes the culture. It will drive down prices, in my opinion.
And drive down prices
of rent, because at the minute rent is very expensive. That's why, you know, our rental culture is sort of quite a negative one. And not only that, I think a lot of the rental stock is poor quality because they get away with it. Whereas, you know, again, if you make it nice quality where people like to live, it's actually like, it's not, at the minute it's like, oh, you rent because you have to. Whereas I would want it to be that renting is, no, I choose to rent because why wouldn't I, sort of thing. There are a few PRS operators, I can't think, there's a name of one particular one. They've got quite a lot of stuff in Manchester. Can't think of their name now. But they've got a really nice product and little things like all their buildings are pet friendly. Yeah. Which sounds really silly, but you know, me as someone with a dog, trying to rent is a nightmare. You know, and little things like that, you know, make, in my opinion, brands really great. I can't think what their name is now. It's going to annoy me.
We're going to put it in the notes.
I'm going to find it in the notes. But they do a really nice brand. But again, you probably wouldn't know it unless you happen to live in one of their buildings. Yeah. Or maybe you're in the industry, when actually I think they have a really good product, really amazing, and it should be more publicly known. Yeah. And it should be that, you know, if you want to rent or you're going to move to a new city, I really hope I get into the whatever
this brand
block or something. Yeah. And there isn't. I do think there are brands that could be that at the minute, but they're just unfortunately not.
I think it's
known enough.
I think as well. Yeah, it's a new. It's still a very in its infancy in build to rent.
No, absolutely.
So I think we're going to see an absolute shift from, like I said, we've got, I don't know, 5 million landlords or something like that, or 2 million landlords and 5 million rental properties. It's very fragmented. Yeah. And you know, lots of people, you know, they've got one property and it's their pension and that's great, but they don't understand it's a business and the customer service maybe isn't quite there. Yeah. Because for them, maybe they haven't got the money to be able to look after property and keep making it nicer and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be a very interesting sector.
I hope we see a massive shift in it because I think it will overall just...
It's about improving things, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's about
improving the market.
Making it better and giving somewhere... I think the kind of, like, the undertone of this whole kind of conversation is about, like, just give someone something they can be proud to live in. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's a home that they buy, it's a place that they rent. Just, you want people to feel relaxed and good at home and feel great about themselves and not feel crap because they never fixed the boiler and I've had no heating for a month, or, you know, I bought this house through a house builder or any builder, and you know what, like, there's loads of issues.
Everything
nothing breaks. They'll try to get hold of them for snagging. I can't get hold of them. Like, it just so it's just about improving, isn't it, and building upon the good work, some of the good work that's been done, and just trying to make it better and trying to attach a brand to that as well. Something with values and
that people can.
What's Newman Rose's? Have you got value? I'm sure you have got values, but like, do you talk about those with Tyler, or is it something that you've kind of said our values are, or is it something that's happened more organically?
It's sort of happened organically, but we're actually in the last like month or so, and me and him are going to take a week away somewhere, like to just separate from the business. Yeah, literally like a think week, maybe like start of next year, just to really like solidify that, and like what is our like company ethos. So like we've sort of said on the education side, you know, we want to create the number one education business in the UK with the best community, the best support, best results, and like that's, you know, a non-negotiable. And we're already working on the next version of the course, which is going to be like, it'll blow the old ones out of the water because, you know, we want to make it so much better. You know, if someone does want to invest in education, like there is only one place to go because we offer the absolute best product, and we sort of need to just get again the exact clarity on that. Because I think, again, going back to the confidence point earlier, and the clarity, it really helps drive everything, and the team around us.
Decisions, doesn't it?
Yeah, if everyone understands what it is we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And so we literally want to just get exact clarity. Like, overall, we've said we want to increase the quality, the customer service, all these things. There's been these like vague concepts, but we want to really like bottom out exactly. These are our 5, rules that we abide by, so to speak.
It always gives you that kind of foundational point to go back to. When, like say, people in the team, as the team expands and stuff like that, you want to be able to bring them back to. You made this decision. Now, does that really fit into what our values are? Okay, we're gonna, from anything from, like you say, picking a certain site to the type of, the size of window that you put.
Exactly. Does it mirror these
values?
Does it
mirror those values? Yeah. And I guess that's how you get that brand right. What's been, what do you feel has been your biggest failure? Is it or let's reframe that slightly. What's been, like, where have you felt the most disappointed with something? Has there been a time where you felt, that's really not gone well? I'm pretty frustrated here.
I never like to say like, I regret this, because I equally
learning
think,
experience.
Yeah, like, obviously there's stuff, if I had my time again, I'd probably do differently, but that's also with the beauty of hindsight. I think the biggest one is, I sort of touched on earlier, I don't feel like I've achieved. I know in my heart of hearts, I could be so much further than I am right now. If I worked harder, more focused, made the right choice. I know it in my heart of heart. So that's my biggest disappointment is...
Do you think you'll ever get there?
I don't know.
Yeah?
I don't know.
Maybe this is something we're all chasing, but it doesn't actually exist, and we just need to live in just enjoy the moment for what it is. Yeah,
I think so.
I think that's I've interviewed quite a lot of people, and obviously spent time with people that are successful, and you do notice, absolutely, that they seem to always be chasing something.
Always chasing
something. I'm
something.
someone myself,
Yeah.
I'm like that as well myself, so, and it's kind of like, what are we all trying to chase?
Yeah, and for what reason? We have this conversation quite often.
Yeah.
I think
it's very deep.
Yeah, it is.
But it's important for people to understand who are listening.
Yeah.
Because it's that, I think there's a balance to, it can become, I'm taking you as an example, Rosey, but just as a general thing, sort of being inside of yourself and being disappointed and saying, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing enough. That can become bad as well for you, can't
absolutely.
it? It's like there's like a balance inside your own brain to be like, and I've started to realise recently, I'm like, I've been talking to myself, you try to talk to yourself more positively.
Yeah.
Because you're like, if you're always saying I've not done enough.
Yeah.
That's quite a tough place to be.
Yeah. I think so, like, I find myself sometimes, I'm like, why do I care?
Yeah.
I always say this, like, sometimes I have a really stressful day and I'm like, why do I care?
Yeah.
Like, why do I actually care about this? Like, I could just have such an easier life if I wanted to.
Yeah.
Like, why don't I at times?
Yeah.
But yeah, there is that, I guess, that driving factor of just wanting to... A big thing for me is one way of showing appreciation for everything I've had is to do so much with it.
Yeah.
And I feel like an obligation to everyone, I guess. Like, there's a lot of kids that don't... I've always been very aware, even when I was a lot younger, like at school. I remember I went to a private secondary school, which obviously my parents paid for, and I understood business quite young, so I understood actually it cost more than just the fee, because my dad's got to earn that in a business, get taxed, personal tax, it costs basically
when did
double.
You in what you were thinking at when you were like 14?
13.
That's
that's
quite that's quite that's not a very normal thing.
So like, I always remember that I have to do really well at school. So I always got like basically straight A's.
Yeah.
Because even though I've gone on to actually, I guess, do nothing with them in like an educational sense, I've not gone to university, but that was like a way of showing the appreciation that I got to go, because a lot of kids they go to shit schools. They don't get the opportunity to go to a really good school like I did. So that's how I show the appreciation. I think that's just continued to carry through, that I have to do the most with the opportunities presented. And I think my frustration is, at times I feel like I still haven't done the most. Yeah. And I don't know when I feel like I will have.
We'll find out, definitely.
Has to be in 10 years.
We're going to set a timer now. Biggest successes then. So I've got a feeling you're not going to have you're not going to give us one, but let's try and think back to a time, what's felt like a proud moment for you, or a successful moment where you've gone, do you know what? I've done pretty well here, or we've done pretty well here.
One moment was when we first launched the course. I remember Tyler was actually doing all the sales calls at the time. It was before we had Pete. We just launched it. I remember at the time thinking, no, why would anyone pay this? Like, it's not the cheapest thing on earth. Yeah. Like, why would anyone pay this? Like, I'm selling bottled air. Like, I remember when I was recording the first version of the course, calling Tyler so many times, like, there's no point. Like, it's rubbish. No one's going to want it. And Tyler being like, no, because he was the one that had to, like, bless him, sit and edit me making a load of mistakes out of the first version of the course.
Blinking a lot.
Yeah, and he was like, I'm telling you now, like,
this is gonna be
it's good. It's good. So then I remember when there was this one day where I think we had 3 sales.
Yeah.
In one day. And I remember just being like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, people actually, like, people like this. Like, what, like, just, I guess I was really surprised.
Yeah.
And I guess that was like the self-doubt, thinking that no one would, for it then to just be like, no, it like really solidified that we were doing the right thing. I think still that's probably one of...
Yeah, that was a moment where you were like, yeah, that was pretty good. What
and I think at that moment I knew...
You were on something, or...
Yeah, and I knew that the stuff that we use that as our cash flow business to fund basically everything that we're doing now, because we needed that to get to the long-term goal. I knew that by achieving that,
it's going to help you get to the long-term goal.
Yeah, I saw all of a sudden actually everything else falling into place behind it.
You talk about cash flow, and with property development, if anyone's listening that is interested in property development but isn't doing it, as you've said and you've taught me, it's definitely a longer process and it takes a while to get paid. So you could be looking at 2 years before you earn a penny.
Easy.
Yeah. So cash flow is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Talk to me of some ways that you could generate cash flow that aren't, the obvious one is you just work a 9-to-5 job and earn some cash and then do it in the evenings. Which is fair play to anyone that does that, because that is tough. Like basically doing like 22-hour days or whatever you're going to be doing to learn cash flow. Let's break it down and understand a bit more about how that works and how you got into that. Did someone say to you, you have a lot of knowledge, you should put this online and then it'll be valuable to someone? Or did you think that yourself?
I kind of thought it myself. So I was teaching people one-on-one before, like basically I was teaching estate agencies how to have a land team because of the dual knowledge I had of both, was sort of what I was doing. And I sort of realised I'm quite good at articulating it. Yeah. And I knew there wasn't really an educator, in my opinion, that was offering what I felt was needed in the market. And at the same time, Tyler was getting into the property education space as well. And, it was sort of collaborative where we decided on what the actual product was, so to speak. And actually, sort of a great piece of advice from my dad, and I think this actually came from one of his private investors, was you have to have a cog, basically. The one thing that constantly spins, that pays the bills, without necessarily thinking too much about it, even if it is a 9-to-5. Like his private investor, I think, was an accountant, whilst investing on things on the side, and eventually invested in something that became very lucrative when they sold the business out. But you've always got to have that cog, which then allows you to do the other things, basically. Yeah, I knew that the education business could be that, because it, for me, in terms of like actual hours, day to day, obviously like recording it all took forever, but once it's actually done, it's quite hands-off in the day-to-day running. I obviously do weekly Q&As and I support students in our community, but that doesn't take, people think that'll take me loads of time, but most questions I can answer in literally quick 30-second message, done. So it actually doesn't take that much of my time day to day, so it allows me to then, so it is for me the perfect cash flow vehicle in that sense, to then focus on the development stuff. And Tyler runs more of the the background of the ads and all of that. But that was the main thing, was the cash flow. But what we've since realised, and we probably didn't fully realise the power of when we first did it, was how that and our development business link. So Tyler has this thing called a flywheel effect, which is like how one thing like affects another. Basically,
he's read a very interesting book.
We have this opinion that if we can create the best education in the UK, we can raise more investment, because we've got students, not only that, an audience. From that we can build better quality development products at more scale. From that, we produce more content. More content goes back into a bigger audience. More content also helps us build even better education because, you know, what's better than learning from someone that's doing it side by side with you? So we actually didn't realise how the two businesses massively interlink, and we're only really starting to see that now.
Yeah.
Like, of the investors in the Cambridge deal, 2 of them are students.
Yeah.
And they were like, of course, yeah. Because they already knew so much about us. They've got that trust,
haven't they? And
and they were actually really excited at the idea of being able to invest with us. And for me, it's great because I can offer them a better learning experience. So they go really hand in hand, and that's where we're really starting to see and hopefully capitalise on that value, because they do just interlink so closely. Particularly, like I say, when we then produce the content off the back of it, they massively positively and could negatively affect each other, I guess, if we got it wrong.
How long did it take you to film? So it's 50 hours of content basically you've got. Yeah. How many hours did that take you to do that final 50 hours? I
think in the end I did Saturday, Sunday for, I want to say it was a good 6-8 weeks.
Yeah.
Sat in the office here and basically all day.
Yeah.
On those.
Yeah, so probably about 400 or 500 hours. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, it
was 8, and then obviously the editing off the back of it.
Yeah.
It was.
I think as well, though, you know, it's interesting what you said about the flywheel. I can't remember the book now. I'm going to put that on the notes as well. Yeah. So I can't remember what the book's called that's got that in. You know, you really buy in. Obviously, I've got first hand because I've done the course. Yeah. So you absolutely buy in. If you watch 50 hours of someone talking, basically,
that's not listening to me. Yeah.
You're going to either really buy into it or absolutely hate it.
Them. Yeah.
Luckily, most people, I'm sure, that's it. But you know, you do really buy into that person, and of course, you feel like you know them, and you build a trust and stuff like that, and you realise very quickly that person. Especially for me, like I've worked in property. I've obviously worked in property, so I do understand it maybe a bit more than just an average person. I think you understand that you know your stuff as well.
Yeah.
So I think that really reinforces that trust and that brand and all of that stuff, which then goes hand in hand, doesn't it, with the investment?
Yeah.
So no, I think it's fantastic. Why not start a company on your own? Why have a business partner?
Yeah, interesting one. And I've been asked that a few times. I don't like working on my own.
Yeah, company.
Yeah. I don't like working on my own. I feel most motivated, and this is a little bit like why I think me and Phil, going back to my early years, got onto it. I always like having someone, which you could say is a negative thing. I should be able to just do it on my own, but I don't like to. I like having someone there. And aside from that, particularly Tyler, because then that's another question, you know, why Tyler? Why not like another person that's been in development or been in construction? You know, Tyler's background isn't so much directly to do with development. One, obviously, we've got the education business together. That allows for those two to link in the way that they couldn't if I had someone else. But we just, you know, we bat off each other really well. And one thing I really like about Tyler as my business partner is there's always a way with him. Like, in a way that I don't think I've ever met in someone else. Like, you know, if he wants to get it done, he'll get it done one way or another. Like, we will find the solution, which I think is really invaluable in the development space, because you get stuff thrown at you left, right and centre, like trying to figure it out. If I didn't have him give me that push, at times I would lose that sense. I might think, I don't know how I'm going to do this, because sometimes I'm definitely more risk averse than Tyler is, whereas having him, that gives me the confidence to sort of like take the leap. The Cambridge site, when we agreed it, we didn't know how we were going to fund it. And I was there like losing sleep, like, God, how are we going to fund it? Because I don't like to let people down. I was like, oh, what if we can't do it? And he was like, well, we can.
We'll find a way.
He just knew he didn't know how. I didn't know how. But he just knew we would. That gave me the confidence that we would, and that's exactly what we did. We found a way.
Did you, when you knew you were going to go into, co-found the company with Tyler, did you both just inherently know that you were quite different? Because in business, from kind of what I've learned, is you maybe need that person that's a bit more risk averse, and that person that's gonna really push it on, and maybe you need a numbers person, and you need some. Do you know what I mean? Or did that kind of just sometimes, if you're both really good at the same things, then you're missing adding value, aren't you, to the company?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, so me and Tyler have known each other, I think, like year 9 or something. He joined my school, so over 10 years now we've known each other. So we know each other so well. But yeah, I think we both know we bring very different things. We have skill sets that cross over, but we're definitely in many ways like complete opposites of each other. But that's why I think the business partnership works as well it does. And don't get me wrong, no one can annoy me like he can. And
I was going to say something
for that reason.
I've got a business partner as well, so but
we're
very different.
We at times can bicker like anything, but it will make up like that. Like he can annoy me, and then the next phone call we're completely fine.
I think as well, like if you're a partner with someone in business, you have to be able to move on quickly. Yeah. Like there's nothing you can't let the business. You have to just have an argument over, done with. If you're sitting there and you're both annoyed with each other for weeks, it's not very good for the business.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is we both ultimately
want the same thing.
We want the same thing, and it's never anything that annoys each other. I don't think it's from either of us from a malicious place.
Yeah, of course.
Like, so it's easier to just you're annoying me, just move on or whatever. But yeah, having that ultimate same ambition and knowing that we both will do whatever it takes, sort of thing, to do that. Yeah. Overrides.
Yeah. How important do you think content is to the success of you moving forward?
It's one of the most fundamental. Don't know, we would do it without. I think we'd find a way, of course, but if we want to scale at the speed we want to scale, we wouldn't be able to do it without content. And YouTube, Instagram, basically building that audience will allow us to leapfrog probably 10 years in timescales.
Do you think you can do it organically? Okay, sorry, actually, let me rephrase that. Most people starting out don't have a cash flow business. They don't have a budget. Yeah. So, do you build... So, let's say, when you price up a site, or when you cost out a site, do you include a content budget into that?
Yeah, we do now. That's one thing. A big content budget.
How much?
One of the sites, it's 6 figures.
Yeah.
For full content. Yeah. Everything, ad spend, that's something. So we have paid traffic as well. Yeah, because it sounds silly to some people, but it's fundamental to our business and the moving forward of our business, and that money has to come from somewhere. And we can't just cash flow it indefinitely from other businesses. If we want to keep growing, it has to be created from more sources. And in appraisals now we have it. It's a marketing budget. So I think if you said to a bank it's a content budget, they'd be like, what is it? Marketing budget, they understand. But we also believe that marketing not only builds the audience, but it will help us sell those products at a premium because of the marketing behind it. So it is genuinely marketing for that site, but also...
You'd probably end up selling most of your places in-house as well.
Yeah, we probably could. Yeah. If we didn't want to, because we'd have that social media presence. But yeah, we have big budget. But I think you can do it without.
What can you do to start out with a very limited budget?
Just putting content out there, and I'm by no means like the content specialist. Like I say, in the business, it's more Tyler that drives the content strategy. But my biggest understanding of it is just keep putting content out there, keep being active, keep having people engage. And it doesn't even have to be like super high production quality. It could just be like an iPhone video that you've shot, quick selfie video explaining something across as many platforms as possible, and just keep going at it. It'll take you longer to get there. Naturally, like I said, we've got paid traffic, which drives people to our, pages and whatnot. So we've got a little bit of a running start in that sense. But yeah, it is literally just putting content out there on a regular basis. And you'll be surprised what people will watch. Yeah. Honestly.
What do you think works in terms of the content? What's been your most successful piece of content?
So far, I think people really like for me anyway, the podcasts. Yeah. When I was at Cassidy Group, because it's obviously not my business, I always had to be quite careful. A bit, Dad's a bit more old school, a bit more doesn't want to share everything. So I had to be a bit more like guarded in what I said. Whereas now it's my business, they're my sites. I'm an open book. Like the videos people see on YouTube coming forward, I'm actually shooting one today. I'm going to break down the numbers. I don't care. I've got nothing to hide, and I think that people really like that from me. And Peter says, and prospective students get on the call, they always say they just like how
transparent and open.
I like nowadays with the content, because it's just for me, my own company. I like to feel like there's no real front. It's just
this is real. This is how we are.
And I think people like. There's not much of that, in my opinion.
There isn't
in the property space.
There isn't any of it. I don't think. Is there?
You know, very few people are just transparent and themselves. So I think people nowadays people see through it.
I think absolutely. I think there's a fine line as well, because I think I've obviously seen different pieces of content. Sometimes it can come across, not saying you guys, but just saying other pieces of content, that maybe it can seem like it's not boastful's maybe not the right word, but it's like, we're going to make 10 million on this site, and they've got certain music in the background, it's like hip hop music, and it's like, we're going to make 10 million, and it's like, I can't relate to that. Yeah. Like, that's not relatable to a person.
Oh, no, I completely agree.
So do you think it's quite, because your sites, there's serious money that can hopefully will be made.
Yeah.
Telling someone you're going to make £1 million can sound a certain way if it's framed in a certain perspective.
Yeah.
So how do you think about that when you're doing do you try to think about that, or is it?
I find it really cringe. Like I hate it. Like I don't even like, I drive quite a nice car. Like I don't have a car being in it. Like because I don't like anything showy. Like it's just not how my family are. Like I really hate stuff like that, and I literally cringe at the thought of doing a video like that. So I think I don't necessarily have to think about it, because I just know I wouldn't talk about it in that sort of way. But I just think it doesn't. I'm so self-conscious of it anyway. Like it's not something I have to actively think about. It just
be true to who you are and what your values are. What does next year look like for Newman Rose?
So we'll be on site with we'll hopefully start on site with 2 projects, the Cambridge one and one that I can't say too much about right now. Probably like Q1, the other one maybe start of Q2 next year. So I'm so excited about it, because that's I love being on site. So I'm so excited to actually see our houses come out of the ground, because they're the first ones as well. I think that will be my most proud moment, is the first time we break ground on one. That will be wow, I've actually done it. Yeah. So that's going to be really exciting. Just watch all that go through, create we're going to document the whole process. Good, the bad, the ugly, you know, when it goes wrong.
Budget's there.
Because it probably will go wrong at some point, and we'll capture all of that, which will be funny.
Of course it will.
It's just bound to. But but again, I think that's important. People see how we handle that, what we do about it. So that, and then we've got a few sites we're taking through planning, sort of more locally for the luxury residential side, and then, like I say, the big focus is then trying to find and tie up those bigger sites for 2023, 2024 and onwards. But next year is going to be really exciting for us. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.